Heat and water were the lifeblood of the Roman Empire. We are going to walk a mile in the sandals of the person who controlled them both, the public bath attendant. By the end, you will see the entire rise and fall of Rome through the steam of a single bathhouse. How did a worker in a wet tunic amass political power? And what deadly secret simmered just beneath the marble floors? What forgotten profession would you choose to understand a lost world? You would find the balneator at the very center of this humid, echoing world. His title translates simply to bath keeper, but his responsibilities were anything but simple. Think of him less as a janitor and more as the chief engineer and general manager of a small, steamy city that operated every single day. His first and most visible duty was financial. He stood at the entrance, collecting the quadrans, the tiny bronze coin that granted anyone, from a senator to a sandal maker, access to this great social equalizer. That coin was the lifeblood of the operation, paying for fuel, maintenance, and wages. But his real power lay in the heat, beneath the ornate marble floors. A hidden world of fire roared in the Prefurnium, the furnace room. The balneator or his team of stokers had to master a delicate and dangerous art. They fed wood and later coal into massive furnaces that heated water for the hot pools, and more ingeniously channeled hot air through a maze of brick pillars called the hypocaust. This system turned the entire floor into a giant radiator, warming the rooms from below. Too little fire, and the patrons complained of a chill. Too much, and the marble could crack, or, worse, the wooden structures above could catch fire. His skill literally held the building together. Once inside, a small army of attendants worked under his direction. Some were responsible for the relentless cleaning, skimming leaves and oil from the pools, scrubbing the marble with sand and vinegar. Others handed out towels, guarded the valuables in the apoditarium, the changing room, or offered to scrape patrons clean with a strigil, a curved metal tool, after they had been oiled. In the largest complexes, like the staggering baths of Caracalla, this was an operation of military precision. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of people moved through each day, and every drop of water, every scrap of fuel, every lost tunic was the balneator's concern. Most often, this man was not a free citizen of high standing. He was frequently a slave, entrusted with this vital role by his wealthy owner, or a freedman who had bought or been granted his freedom, and now ran the baths as a business. He lived on the premises in a small room near the furnaces, his life dictated by the rhythms of the crowd and the endless demand for heat. So while senators debated in the forum, the true pulse of Roman daily life was measured here, in the clink of a quadrans coin and the glow of a furnace, all under the watchful eye of the bath attendant. His day began in the deep, silent dark, long before the first patron even dreamed of waking. While Rome slept, the balneator was already moving through the cold, empty halls, his sandals echoing in the vast, shadowy spaces. His first and most critical task was to rouse the giant. In the Prefurnium, the furnace room, he and his stokers would coax last night's embers back to a roaring blaze, feeding logs into the hungry mouths of the furnaces that heated the massive bronze boilers. This was not a quick job. Heating the thousands of gallons of water for the Caldarium's steaming plunge pool, and more importantly, warming the labyrinth of brick pillars in the hypocaust under the floors, took hours of careful, relentless labor. A miscalculation now meant a cold, unhappy crowd later, and an unhappy crowd meant complaints to the owner. As the first grey light touched the high windows, the heat began its slow, invisible work. It seeped up through the hollow floors, warming the marble slabs of the tepidarium, the warm room, to a gentle, soothing temperature. It took the chill off the vast, vaulted space of the frigidarium, the cold plunge hall, just enough. and it turned the Caldarium into a dense, humid paradise of steam. By the time the gates opened, each room had to be perfectly calibrated, a symphony of temperatures conducted by fire. The first wave of bathers were often the elderly or the serious athletes, seeking the healing heat or a soak before their exercises. The pace was manageable, a steady trickle. But the balneator knew this was merely the calm. His real test came at the 6th hour, around midday, when business in the forum concluded. Like a tide, the city poured into the baths. Senators, merchants, soldiers off duty, poets, and potters all converged. A river of humanity shedding their social rank with their street clothes in the Appoditerium. The noise level soared into a constant, echoing din of splashing, laughter, gossip, and the calls of snack vendors. Now the attendant was in constant motion, a conductor of chaos. He directed his staff to skim the suddenly crowded pools, to collect towels, to watch for petty thieves in the changing room. He ensured the furnaces were fed extra fuel to meet the soaring demand for hot water, the stokers sweating in the hellish glow. He mediated minor disputes over bench space or lost sandals. For hours he moved through this humid, aromatic cloud of steam, oil, and humanity. His authority the thin line between Roman leisure and utter bedlam. Finally, as dusk settled, the last patron departed, leaving behind a scene of watery wreckage. The pools were littered with leaves from the decorative plants, slicks of olive oil from the bather's skin, and the general grime of 1,000 people. The marble floors were slick and dirty. The evening shift was a marathon of restoration. Attendants drained and scrubbed the pools, scoured the marble with sand and vinegar until it gleamed, and collected mountains of used towels for laundering. In the furnace room, the fires were carefully banked, reduced to a steady glow that would keep the hypocaust warm through the night, ready for the whole impossible cycle to begin again at dawn. The balneator's final walk through was in near darkness, the only light from a flickering oil lamp. He moved through the silent, steaming halls, the heat still radiating from the floors, the scent of clean water and wet stone hanging in the air. It was a bone-deep exhaustion, earned in a world of relentless heat and endless demand. He had kept the heart of Roman daily life beating for one more day. To truly understand his world, you must walk the path he walked every single day. Begin at the grand entrance, where you would stand to collect that all-important quadrans coin. This was your first point of contact with the public, a place of smiles and negotiation, but also of tension. You had to spot the potential troublemaker, the known thief, or the overly entitled patron before they even stepped inside. Once past the entrance, the bather entered the Appoditerium, the changing room. Here your role shifted to that of a trusted guardian. Wealthy patrons would strip down, leaving behind fine tunics, jewelry, and even purses. In larger bathhouses, you might operate a system of numbered shelves or niches, handing out a token to the patron. The security of this room was paramount. A single theft could ruin your reputation and bring the wrath of a powerful citizen down upon you. The air here was cool and dry, filled with the murmur of conversation and the clatter of sandals being removed. From the changing room, many patrons would move into the palestra, the open exercise yard. Your attention here was less on the people and more on the space itself. You ensured the wrestling sand was raked, the weights for lifting were orderly, and the ball courts were clear. This was a place of energy and noise, a stark contrast to the humid quiet of the bathing halls to come. Now you guide the patron into the bathing sequence itself. First, the tepidarium, the warm room. This was your masterpiece of temperature control. The marble benches and floors were heated by the hypocaust below to a gentle, soothing warmth, designed to prepare the body gradually. You would constantly check the feel of the floor with your bare foot, a living thermostat. Was it too hot? A patron could be scalded. Too cool? They would complain of a chill. This perfect, even warmth was your daily engineering triumph. Next came the heart of the experience, the Caldarium. This room hit you like a wall. The air was thick with steam, fragrant with oils, and almost uncomfortably hot. In the center sat a large, deep plunge pool of steaming water, the labrum. Here, your logistical nightmare was constant. This water was heated by a bronze boiler set directly over the furnace. Maintaining a safe yet pleasurable temperature was a relentless dance with the stokers below. More than that, the pool had to be kept clean. Without modern filters, you relied on constant skimming, and at the end of the day, a complete drain and scrub. Every hour, oil from 100 bodies would rise to the surface, and leaves from decorative plants would fall in. Your eye was always on the water's clarity. After sweating in the heat, a bather would retreat to the frigidarium, the spectacular cold plunge hall. This vast, often domed space featured a large, shallow pool of cold, refreshing water. This was supplied directly by the aqueduct, a continuous flow of fresh, clean water that was the lifeblood of the entire complex. Your job was to ensure that flow never stopped. You monitored the lead pipes for leaks or blockages, knowing that a failure here would shut down the entire operation. And beneath your feet, hidden but felt in every room, was the true marvel, the hypocaust system. You knew its every groan and sigh. In the furnace room, the prefernium, slaves stoked fires that sent hot air through a maze of brick pillars, the pili that raised the entire floor. This created a giant, invisible radiator. Maintaining this system was backbreaking and dangerous work. Checking for cracks in the flues, clearing soot, and ensuring the heat was evenly distributed was a never-ending task. A collapsed hypocaust pillar meant a cold room and days of expensive repairs. So your daily tour was a circuit of constant vigilance, from the social dynamics of the changing room to the fiery mechanics below the floors, all to maintain a perfect, steamy illusion of effortless Roman luxury. The true test of a balneator was not managing the furnace, but navigating the human tide that washed through his doors each day. This was Rome in miniature, a social experiment conducted in steam. In one corner of the tepidarium, a senator, his skin pink from the heat, might be locked in a low, serious conversation with a political ally, their words masked by the general din. A few benches away, a wealthy merchant from Alexandria loudly boasted about the price of Egyptian grain, hoping to attract investors. Off-duty legionaries, their bodies marked with scars and military tattoos, soaked their aching muscles in the hot pool, swapping stories that grew taller with each retelling. And everywhere, the ordinary citizens of Rome, the bakers, the carpenters, the clerks, all enjoying the same luxury as their social superiors, if only for an hour. Your role as attendant required a social radar of exquisite sensitivity. Addressing a senator required a deferential tone, a slight bow of the head. You might call him Dominus, master. For a regular laborer, a simple nod and a familiar greeting sufficed. The unspoken rules were everything. You never made direct eye contact for too long with a high-status patron, yet you had to appear attentive and ready to serve at a moment's notice. You learned to overhear nothing and see everything. A successful day was measured not just in coins collected, but in favors earned. A particularly satisfied senator might leave a generous tip, a few extra sestertii that could buy a week's worth of food. More valuable than coin was influence. Doing a small, discreet favor, like ensuring a patron's favorite strigil was clean and ready, or reserving a quiet corner of the Caldarium, could build a debt of gratitude. This patron might later speak well of you to the bath's owner. or even use his influence to help you in a minor legal dispute. But the flip side was threat. A powerful man, displeased by a drafty room or a lukewarm pool, could have you punished or even dismissed with a single word to your master. Your authority within the baths was absolute over slaves and children, but it vanished in the face of a citizen's anger. And then there were the women. In many establishments, women bathed either in completely separate wings or were allotted specific, earlier hours in the day. When they were present, the entire atmosphere shifted. The noise level often dropped, the conversations became more subdued. Your staff had to be even more vigilant, ensuring privacy and decorum were maintained. Managing this separate, parallel world doubled your logistical duties, but also brought a different kind of patronage, as wealthy matrons could be equally demanding and equally generous. So you moved through this swirling social sea, a master of discretion, knowing that your survival depended on reading a room as accurately as you read the temperature of the floors. You were the silent witness to Rome's secrets, its deals, its complaints, and its rare, unguarded moments of peace, all shared in the common, steamy truth of the water. But beyond the daily grind of heat and water, the bath attendant's position came with a set of unique, unofficial advantages. The most valuable currency in Rome was not always gold, it was information. And the baths were the empire's greatest newsroom. As you moved silently through the steam, scraping a back here, delivering a towel there, you were perfectly positioned to overhear everything. A senator, relaxed and unguarded in the hot pool, might let slip a detail about an upcoming vote or a rivalry with a fellow consul. Merchants discussed shipping routes, grain prices, and which provincial governors could be bribed. Soldiers grumbled about pay or hinted at troop movements. This steady stream of gossip, rumor and fact was a treasure trove. A clever balneator with a good memory could piece together a surprisingly accurate picture of the empire's pulse. He might use this knowledge to his own advantage, perhaps by investing in a merchant's venture he knew was sound, or by simply knowing which powerful man to approach for a favor. This information network was a perk no other profession of his station could easily access. Then there were the tangible rewards. A grateful patron, soothed by a perfectly heated Caldarium or thankful for the safe return of a valuable ring, might show his appreciation not just with the standard quadrants, but with extra coin, a flask of fine wine, or a portion of food from the vendor stalls outside. For a slave attendant, these tips were crucial. Every sestertius saved was a step toward a seemingly impossible goal, buying his own freedom. This was the remarkable social mobility hidden within the humid walls. A slave who was diligent, shrewd, and lucky could, over many years, accumulate the substantial sum required for manumission. Once freed, he could continue as a paid manager of the baths, or even lease the operation from the owner, becoming a businessman in his own right. Some successful freedmen balneators grew genuinely wealthy, their fortunes built on soap, water, and overheard secrets. And we must not overlook a simpler, more human comfort. In a city where winter could be damp and chilly, especially for those living in cramped, insular apartments with little heat, the bathhouse offered a refuge of constant, enveloping warmth. While other Romans shivered, the attendant worked in a world that was always summer. The heat from the hypocaust kept his living quarters cozy, and the steam was a balm for aching joints after a long day. In a society of stark contrasts, this was a profound, everyday luxury. So his life was a paradox of hard labor and unique privilege, a blend of soot and influence, where the most valuable things he handled were not towels or coins, but the secrets whispered in the steam. Yet for all its hidden privileges, this life was one of relentless physical risk. The air you breathed was your first enemy. In the furnace room, the praefurnium, the thick smoke from wood and coal fires was a constant haze, searing your lungs with every shift. Even in the grand bathing halls, the warm, damp air was a perfect breeding ground for mold and mildew. Clinging to the high ceilings and hidden corners, a silent threat to your health with every steamy inhalation. And the heat itself was a danger that never slept. The marble edges of the labrum, the hot plunge pool, could become scorching. A slip on a wet floor could mean a terrible burn against a heated bench, or the furnace-heated floor of the Caldarium. You or your stokers bore the scars of this intimacy with fire. Marks from a splash of boiling water or a misjudged piece of equipment. In an age before germ theory, the baths were also a paradox of cleanliness and contagion. While individuals were scrubbed clean, the shared water in those vast pools was a soup of humanity. When an epidemic swept through Rome, be it a stomach illness or something far worse, the crowded, humid bathhouse was often its perfect amplifier. You worked at the very heart of the outbreak, an unwitting guardian of a public health hazard. Then came the human hazards. As the day wore on and the wine from the snack vendors flowed freely, the atmosphere could shift. The relaxed gossip of the 6th hour could curdle into the loud, belligerent arguments of the 8th. A drunk patron, emboldened by the anonymity of the crowd, might start a fight over a misplaced strigil or an imagined insult. Your job was to diffuse these situations instantly, without offending anyone of status. A single misstep could turn a minor scuffle into a riotous brawl, with you bearing the blame for failing to keep order. And the entitled patron was a special kind of torment. A wealthy equestrian might demand you empty the entire Caldarium pool because he found the temperature a degree too cool. Or a senator's wife could scream at a young attendant for a wrinkled towel. You absorbed this anger with a bowed head and a calm demeanor, your own frustration boiling silently beneath the surface. This burden of responsibility extended into the legal realm. Roman law was intricate and harsh. If a patron slipped on a wet step you had not yet mopped and broke his arm, you were liable. If a child was scalded by water from an overstoked furnace, it was your negligence. Most terrifying of all was a theft from the apoditerium. Even with your careful token system, a clever thief could strike. The victim, humiliated and angry, would not blame an unseen criminal. He would blame you, the man in charge. You could face a beating from your owner, a huge financial penalty, or even be sold away to a far harsher life as punishment for the loss. Your entire existence was a tightrope walk over a pit of potential disaster. And beneath all these acute dangers was a constant, grinding exhaustion. Your workday began before dawn and ended long after dusk. A cycle of 14 hours or more spent in oppressive heat and deafening noise. The clamor of 1,000 voices echoing off marble and water was not a lively background. It was a physical pressure, a headache that built through the afternoon and never truly faded. You slept in a small cell near the furnaces, the residual heat making rest fitful, your body never fully cooling down. You woke tired to do it all again. The perks of warmth and whispers came at a steep price, paid in sweat, vigilance, and the quiet, enduring ache in your bones. The furnace room was the beating heart of the entire operation, a place few patrons ever saw but whose power they felt in every room. This was the praefurnium, and for the balneator, it was both his kingdom and his prison. Here, the simple act of staying warm became a monumental feat of engineering. The system was called the hypocaust, a word meaning fire below. Its genius was in its invisibility. First, the floors were not solid. They were raised on hundreds of small brick pillars, creating a hidden cavity beneath the marble. This cavity was the suspensory. Into this space, the furnace blasted its scorching air, but it didn't stop at the floor. The heat also traveled up through hollow clay bricks called tubuli, which were built right into the walls, turning entire rooms into radiant ovens. Think of it as a living, breathing building. The furnace was the lungs, the hollow floors and walls were the arteries, and the hot air was the lifeblood, circulating silently to warm every corner. Managing this system required the skill of a conductor. Each room in the bath sequence needed a different temperature. The tepidarium required a gentle, consistent warmth. The caldarium needed an intense, humid heat. Achieving this balance was not just about throwing more wood on the fire, it was about control. The balneator or his head stoker used a system of dampers, simple clay or bronze plates, within the network of flues. By opening or closing these dampers, they could direct the flow of hot air, sending more heat to the caldarium while restricting it to the tepidarium. A skilled attendant knew the building's quirks, which flue tended to run hot, which room cooled down fastest. He would walk the halls, placing a bare hand on the wall to feel the heat radiating through the tubuli. His own body the most sensitive instrument he had. A mistake meant a cold, complaining crowd in one room and an unbearable, empty sauna in another. Then there was the fuel. The appetite of those furnaces was insatiable. A large imperial bath complex, like the baths of Caracalla, could consume entire forests. Sourcing, storing, and feeding this mountain of wood was a logistical nightmare all its own. The balneator had to coordinate with merchants, ensure a dry storage area to prevent rot, and manage a team of stokers whose sole job was to feed the endless hunger of the flames. The work in the Prefurnium itself was brutal. The stokers worked in a hellish glow, their bodies slick with sweat and soot, the air thick with smoke and heat. They followed a precise rhythm, knowing that letting the fire dip too low meant hours of work to bring the temperatures back up. If the fires died completely, the entire business shut down. The marble floors would grow cold, the water in the boilers would cool, and the heart of that social world would simply stop beating. So the balneator's most critical skill was not social, but elemental. He was a master of fire and air, tasked with taming a force that could warm an empire or reduce his world to cold, silent stone. The true engineering marvel was not the fire below, but the endless river above. While the hypocaust heated the air, the entire ritual depended on a more fundamental element, water, and managing its flow was a hydraulic puzzle on a colossal scale. It began miles away with the aqueducts, those graceful stone arteries that carried fresh mountain water into the heart of Rome. This water did not flow directly into the pools. First, it cascaded into enormous holding tanks, vast cisterns that acted as the bathhouses' reservoir. From these cisterns, a network of lead pipes, controlled by a series of sluice gates, directed the flow. The frigidarium's cold plunge pool was the simplest in concept. It was often fed by a continuous stream of this fresh, cold aqueduct water. An overflow channel ensured it never spilled over, carrying away the surface scum and constantly renewing the water. This was the cleanest water in the entire complex, a gift of Roman engineering that required little daily intervention beyond ensuring the pipes were clear. The hot water for the caldarium was a different beast entirely. Here, the water was not flowing through. It was held in massive bronze boilers, called ahenna, which were suspended directly over the furnace fires in the Prefurnium. Filling these boilers was a careful operation. Attendants would open sluice gates to allow cold water from the cistern to pour in. Then stokers would stoke the fires beneath to a ferocious heat. The balneator had to judge the volume perfectly. Too much water and it would never reach a steaming temperature. Too little, and the boiler would run dry, risking a catastrophic meltdown of the metal. But the most daunting challenge came at the end of every single day: drainage. How do you empty a pool the size of a small lake? The Romans used gravity and grunt work. At the bottom of each pool, especially the large hot plunge, was a main drain plug, often a heavy stone or lead stopper. An attendant would wade into the cooling water, pull the plug, and a torrent would rush out through a large lead pipe into the city's main sewer, the Cloaca Maxima. This was just the beginning. Once the bulk of the water was gone, a slick, treacherous landscape of marble remained, coated in a stubborn film. This was the infamous Roman grease. Bathers would coat their skin in olive oil before exercising, then have it scraped off with a strigil. Much of that oil, along with sweat, dirt, and dead skin, washed right into the pool. It created a greasy scum on the surface and a slippery residue on every submerged step and bench. Cleaning this was a Herculean task. Teams of slaves would descend with buckets of sand and vinegar, or sometimes powdered pumice stone, and scrub every inch on their hands and knees until the marble squeaked. They would then rinse it all with buckets of fresh water, often manually hauled from the cistern, before finally replacing the drain plug to begin the slow refill for the next day. And then there were the living invaders. In the warm, nutrient-rich water, algae could bloom quickly, turning a beautiful blue pool a murky green. Without chemicals, the only remedy was more relentless scrubbing, and the hope that the constant influx of fresh water would keep it at bay. So the balneator's mastery was not just of fire, but of the complete cycle of water, from its pristine arrival via aqueduct, through its transformation into steam and scum, to its final grimy exit into the darkness of the sewers. A cycle repeated every single day without fail. This constant flow of water and humanity was, at its core, a business. The grand marble halls may have been built by emperors or wealthy patrons as gifts to the people, but their daily operation was a matter of hard economics. While the state or a generous benefactor owned the physical building, they rarely ran it themselves. Instead, they leased the entire complex to a private manager, a man called a conductor. This conductor was often a freedman, a former slave who had bought his freedom, and now operated the baths as a commercial enterprise. He paid a fixed annual rent to the owner, and everything he earned above that amount was his profit. This is where the humble balneator, if he was shrewd, could transform his life. The conductor needed a reliable, knowledgeable man on the ground, and that was frequently the head bath attendant. In this role, the attendant became the chief executive of a bustling urban hub. His primary income stream was the entrance fee, the quadrans. It was the smallest bronze coin in circulation, worth almost nothing to a wealthy senator, but absolutely everything to the operation. The magic was in the volume. A modest neighborhood bath might see 500 visitors a day. A massive imperial complex like the baths of Diocletian could see thousands. Multiply that tiny coin by that immense crowd, day after day, and it became a river of bronze. But the quadrans was just the cover charge. The real profit lay in the extras. A patron might rent a towel for another small fee. He could purchase a flask of scented olive oil for his skin, or a strigil to scrape himself clean. For a higher price, he could hire a skilled attendant for a massage, or a more vigorous rub down. And after all that bathing and socializing, people got hungry and thirsty. The conductor often subleased space to snack vendors, thermopolia, who sold sausages, bread, cheese, and wine, kicking back a percentage of their sales to the bath manager. Every transaction, from a sip of wine to a scraped back, added another coin to the till. A successful conductor, with his trusted balneator managing the daily chaos, could become a very wealthy man. He lived not in a cramped room by the furnace, but in a comfortable domus elsewhere in the city. For the balneator himself, this system was the ladder out of servitude. If he was a slave, he might be allowed to keep a portion of the tips and extras, slowly saving toward his freedom price. Once freed, he could work as a paid manager for a conductor, or with enough capital and connections, lease a smaller bathhouse himself. His intimate knowledge of fire, water, and human nature became the foundation of his fortune. The steamy air of the baths, thick with the smell of oil and sweat, was also thick with the scent of opportunity. A place where a man could quite literally wash away his past and climb the social ladder, one quadrans at a time. His world was defined by the objects in his hands. Every item, from the smallest flask to the heaviest brush, had a purpose and a place in the unending rhythm of the baths. First were the tools of the bathers, which he provided, maintained, and often collected payment for. The most iconic was the strigil. This curved metal blade, usually made of bronze or iron, was the Roman equivalent of a washcloth. A patron would coat his skin in olive oil, then use the strigil's concave edge to scrape away the oil, along with sweat, dirt, and dead skin. The attendant kept a supply of these, ensuring they were clean and free of rust. The oil itself was stored in small, elegant flasks, called ampullae, made of glass or pottery. A bather might bring his own, or purchase one from the bathhouse vendor. The attendant oversaw this trade, the scent of lavender, rose, or plain olive oil mingling with the steam. Then came the towels. A simple linen cloth, often rented for a tiny extra fee, was essential for drying off after the final cold plunge. Managing the laundry for hundreds, sometimes thousands, of towels each day was a logistical feat in itself, requiring a small army of washers and dryers. And on his own feet, the balneator wore a practical necessity: wooden-soled sandals or shoes with thick leather soles. These were not for fashion, but for survival. The marble floors of the Caldarium, heated from below, could become painfully hot to bare feet. His sandals were his insulation, allowing him to move freely through his domain without injury. His other set of tools was for the relentless work of restoration. At the end of each day, his staff wielded stiff bristled brushes made of twigs or animal hair, and rough natural sponges hauled from the Mediterranean. They scrubbed every marble surface with a mixture of sand and vinegar, a gritty paste that cut through the greasy film left by the bathers. Buckets were constantly in motion, hauling fresh water for rinsing or carting away the dirty slurry to the drain. While the Romans did not have soap as we know it, they sometimes used a precursor called sopo, a crude lye-based paste made from animal fat and ash, which was more commonly used for laundering clothes than washing skin. For the hidden machinery of the baths, his tools grew more specialized. In the furnace room, he might use long iron pokers and rakes to manage the burning logs and clear ash from the hypocaust flues. For the plumbing, a simple bronze wrench or a heavy mallet might be needed to adjust the lead pipes or tap a stubborn drain plug back into place. Each object in his care, from the delicate strigil to the soot-blackened poker, was an extension of his will, a means to maintain order in a world constantly tending towards steam and chaos. But the quadrans was merely the key to the door. Inside, a whole economy of comfort unfolded, and the clever attendant was at its center. Beyond the basic entry fee, the most sought-after service was the unctor, the masseur. After a long session in the hot rooms, muscles relaxed and pores open. A patron would lie on a warm marble bench. The unctor, often a slave with strong, skilled hands, would apply more scented oil and perform a deep, rhythmic massage. This was not a simple rub. It was a therapeutic art, easing the aches of a soldier's old wounds or the tension in a scribe's shoulders from hours bent over a desk. For this luxury, a patron paid extra, and a portion of that fee went directly to the attendant who arranged it, or to the unctor himself if he was saving for freedom. Hair removal was another common service. Using tweezers or a sticky resin paste, attendants would offer depilation, a practice considered essential for cleanliness and aesthetic appeal in Roman culture. These were the official, above-board extras that made a visit more pleasurable and padded the bathhouse's income. But the largest complexes transcended mere bathing. They were cultural centers. The baths of Caracalla featured two vast libraries, one for Greek scrolls and one for Latin. Gardens with shaded walkways and fountains offered a retreat from the steam. Some even had small theaters or lecture halls where philosophers might speak. Each of these spaces required staff, librarians to handle the precious scrolls, gardeners to tend the plants, and custodians for the halls. For an ambitious attendant, managing these auxiliary areas was a step up, a move from the humid chaos of the pools to the quiet dignity of a library, a position with less grime and more prestige. Then there were the vendors. The smell of grilling sausages and warm bread was as much a part of the bathhouse atmosphere as the scent of steam and oil. Thermopolia, hot food counters, were often leased out by the bath manager. An attendant with an entrepreneurial spirit might run one himself, or have a family member do so, ensuring a cut of the profits from every loaf sold and every cup of wine poured. He might also keep a small stock of luxuries for sale, a finer strigil with an ivory handle, a glass bottle of imported perfume from Syria, or a new pair of bath sandals. A patron who had forgotten his own oil flask or broken his strigil was a captive customer, willing to pay a premium for convenience right there on the spot. This official economy, however, was just the surface. The real social magic happened in the unofficial side hustles, the grey market of favors and connections. As the man who knew everyone, the attendant became a trusted node in a vast network. A merchant from Spain, new to Rome, might ask him for a recommendation for a reliable shipping agent. The attendant, having overheard countless conversations, could point him to an honest man, perhaps receiving a small finder's fee for the introduction. He might run discreet errands for a regular patron, delivering a sealed message across the city or purchasing a gift for a wife, all for a few extra coins. His most valuable role was that of an informal broker. He knew who was looking to sell a piece of property and who had the money to buy. He knew which poet was seeking a wealthy patron for sponsorship. He could quietly connect people in the neutral, relaxed space of the baths, a service far more valuable than any massage. In this way, the bath attendant wove himself into the very fabric of daily Roman life. His power was not written in law, but in the accumulation of 1,000 small debts and favors. He was the unseen hand that greased the social wheels, proving that in ancient Rome, the most important business was often conducted not in the forum, but in the steam. Yet for all his hidden influence, the bath attendant existed within a cage of rigid social rules. His place on the ladder defined everything, from where he slept to how he was seen. Most attendants were not free men. They were slaves, the property of the bath's wealthy owner, listed in his inventory alongside the bronze boilers and marble benches. His life was one of total immersion, quite literally. He likely slept in a small, cell-like room attached to the baths, perhaps near the furnace for warmth, his world never extending beyond the echoing halls and the soot-stained praefurnium. His meals were simple, his time rarely his own. He was a piece of vital machinery, valued for his skill but ultimately replaceable. Yet within this system, a narrow, shimmering path upward existed. It was called manumission. A slave who was exceptionally diligent, who saved every tip and curried every favor, could dream of buying his freedom. The price was high, often equivalent to many years of wages for a free laborer. But it was possible. A generous owner, impressed by loyalty and profit, might also grant freedom as a reward. The moment of manumission was a profound transformation. The slave was formally pronounced free before a magistrate, or sometimes in a simpler ceremony before friends. He became a libertus, a freedman. This new status was a legal twilight. He was free, but not entirely equal. He gained the right to own property, to marry legally, and to have a family whose children would be born as full Roman citizens. Most importantly for our attendant, he could now enter contracts. He could lease a bathhouse from his former master or another owner, becoming the conductor, the businessman we discussed earlier. He could finally profit directly from his lifetime of hard-won expertise. Yet the latter had a cruel catch. The social stigma of his past and his trade clung to him like the scent of smoke and oil. To the senatorial elite, whose ancestors had conquered the world, a wealthy freedman was still a vulgar upstart. His money was new, his hands were dirty, and his manners were learned in servitude. The Roman writer Seneca sneered at such men, criticizing their loud voices and ostentatious displays of wealth, signs of their insecure place in the world. The freedman balneator might live in a fine house, but he would never be invited to dine at a patrician's table. He could amass a fortune, but his name would never appear among the lists of honorable magistrates. His power was economic and practical, never social or political. He was a man of two worlds, navigating the steamy democracy of the baths where all were equal in nakedness, while outside he remained forever marked by the soot of the furnace and the memory of the chain. The steam of the baths was thick with more than just heat and gossip. It was saturated with law. Every aspect of this public space, from who could enter to when they could bathe, was governed by a web of imperial decrees and municipal regulations. Emperors themselves often set the rules, issuing edicts that standardized the tiny quadran's entrance fee across the empire to ensure even the poorest citizen could afford this basic right. They decreed opening hours, ensuring baths were available from dawn until dusk, and most critically, they enforced strict separation of the sexes to prevent scandal. In many establishments, women were allotted specific, earlier hours in the day, or they bathed in completely separate wings with their own entrances. This was not merely a suggestion. It was law, designed to maintain public order and moral decency in a place where social boundaries were literally stripped away. The enforcement of these rules and all matters of urban management fell to the aediles. These were elected city officials, and part of their duty was the inspection of the baths. They would arrive unannounced, their togas a stark contrast to the half-dressed crowd. Their eyes were everywhere. They checked the temperature of the water in the Caldarium, ensuring it met legal standards for safety. They inspected the cleanliness of the pools, the clarity of the water, and the state of the marble floors. They examined the furnaces and the hypocaust flues for fire hazards. A bathhouse found wanting could be fined heavily, or even shut down temporarily. A financial disaster for the conductor and a mark of shame for the balneator. His skill in managing the physical plant was constantly under official scrutiny. But the most nerve-wracking legal concept for the attendant was that of custodia, liability for goods deposited. When a patron handed over his tunic, his purse, or his gold ring in the apoditerium, a legal contract was formed. The bathkeeper assumed a duty of care. If those items were stolen, the patron could sue. The question was, how liable was the attendant? Roman law drew a subtle but crucial distinction. If the attendant or his staff were proven to be negligent, perhaps by leaving the changing room unattended, then he was absolutely responsible and had to repay the value. But if he could demonstrate he had taken reasonable care, using a token system and posting guards, and the theft was the act of a clever, unknown criminal, the liability might be lessened. Proving that, however, meant a day in court, arguing before a magistrate against a wealthy, angry citizen. The outcome was never certain, so every day the balneator walked a legal tightrope. He balanced imperial decrees, dodged the inspections of the aediles, and carried the constant, heavy weight of potential lawsuits in a room full of other people's valuables. His world was not just one of steam and sweat, but of scrolls and statutes, where a single lost necklace could unravel a lifetime of careful work. This paradox of cleanliness was the central, unspoken tension of the balneator's world. The Romans were famously proud of their baths, seeing them as the very mark of a civilized society. Yet they were navigating this world without the most basic understanding of germs. For them, dirt was what you could see, the grime on the skin, the mud on the feet. The invisible threats multiplying in the warm, communal water were a mystery. This meant their cleaning rituals were both advanced and profoundly inadequate. They skimmed the pools and scrubbed the marble with vinegar, which has mild antibacterial properties they never knew about. But the water itself in those vast plunge pools was rarely changed completely more than once a day. In a complex serving thousands, the same water, warmed to a perfect incubator temperature, was shared by countless bodies throughout the afternoon. It was a broth of humanity, a thought that would horrify us today. Even the elite were aware something was amiss. The philosopher Seneca, who lived in an apartment uncomfortably close to a busy bathhouse, complained bitterly not just about the noise of the weightlifters and the hair pluckers, but about the quality of the water itself. He wrote of it being murky and thick, disgusted by what he saw. The attendant stood at the front line of this battle, armed with buckets and brooms against an enemy he could not comprehend. His daily war was against the visible filth, the oil slicks, and the muddy footprints, while an invisible war raged just beneath the surface. And yet, to dismiss the baths as merely dirty would be to miss their profound value. For all their microbial hazards, they offered undeniable benefits. The heat improved circulation and soothed aching muscles in a society of hard physical labor. The ritual of scraping the skin with a strigil did remove the top layer of sweat and grime, providing a basic, tangible level of hygiene for the urban masses who had no running water at home. Perhaps most importantly, the social and psychological well-being they provided was immense. In a crowded, stratified city, the baths were a great equalizer and a place of communal relaxation, a steam-filled therapy session for the entire populace. The balneator's impossible task was to balance these two opposing truths, to maintain the glorious, clean illusion of Roman order within the warm, wet, and wonderfully messy reality of human life. The sheer scale of the imperial baths defies modern imagination. To be assigned as a balneator at the baths of Caracalla was to command a small, steamy nation. The complex sprawled over 30 acres, its central bathing block larger than most modern shopping malls. Your daily crowd could number in the thousands, a ceaseless river of humanity flowing through halls so vast their vaulted ceilings vanished into shadow. The logistics were staggering. You managed not one furnace, but a battery of them, each feeding heat to different wings. The sound was a constant, thunderous roar of water and voices echoing off acres of marble and mosaic. A single cold plunge pool, the Frigidarium, was the size of an Olympic swimming pool. Keeping its water clean required a team of slaves with nets working in shifts. a never-ending battle against a tide of leaves and oil. The luxury was equally immense. You would walk past libraries holding thousands of scrolls, through gardens with full-sized trees, and past statues so large they made the patrons look like children. Here, you were not just a bathkeeper. You were a high-stakes operations manager for one of the ancient world's grandest and most crowded leisure machines. The pressure was monumental, but so was the potential for prestige and profit. A man who could keep the baths of Caracalla running smoothly had mastered his craft at the highest level. Yet history rarely records the names of such men. They are the anonymous cogs in a magnificent machine. Except sometimes they speak for themselves. In the ash-preserved streets of Pompeii, a piece of graffiti scratches a personal complaint onto a wall. It reads, "Two friends were here, and while they had a bad time because of a thief." We can almost hear the frustrated balneator sighing in the background, dealing with the aftermath in his apoditerium. More poignant are the tombstones. In Rome's archaeological record, inscriptions proudly declare a man's life's work. One reads simply, "To the spirits of the departed, for Lucius Coltilius Stephanus, balneator." Another, erected by a grieving wife, states, "To my dearest husband, Crescens, a bath attendant of the baths of Nero." These are not the grand monuments of senators, but the quiet, proud affirmations of men who define themselves by their essential trade. They wanted to be remembered for what they did, for the skill that gave them identity and purpose in the humming heart of the city. It tells us that this demanding, gritty profession was a source of genuine dignity. A man could spend his life in the heat and noise, and when he was gone, the single word balneator carved in stone was enough to sum up a lifetime of keeping the water hot and the chaos at bay. The world of the bath attendant was a relentless assault on the senses, a symphony of noise, scent, and spectacle that never truly paused. The sound was the first thing that defined his reality, a physical presence that pressed in from all sides. From the moment the gates opened, a low hum built into a roaring cacophony. In the palaestra, the sharp smack of a handball echoed, followed by the grunts of men lifting stone weights, and the rhythmic slapping of feet on the wrestling sand. Inside the bathing halls, the noise multiplied and warped in the steamy air. 1,000 conversations swirled into a constant, indecipherable roar, punctuated by the explosive splash of a body leaping into the cold plunge pool. The sharp crack of a masseur's hand against a patron's back cut through the din, while the clatter of bronze strigils being dropped on marble floors created a metallic percussion. Beneath it all, felt more than heard, was the deep, subterranean growl of the furnaces, a constant reminder of the fire that powered everything. This was not a lively background buzz. It was a wall of sound that built throughout the day, leaving the attendant with a permanent, low-grade headache that only faded in the deep silence of the night. Then came the smells, a complex and ever-changing perfume that told the story of the day. The dominant scent was the clean, mineral smell of steam rising from hot water on stone, a comforting, humid blanket. But woven through it were sharper notes. The tang of human sweat, especially in the crowded Caldarium, mixed with the floral and herbal aromas of expensive oils, lavender, rose, and myrrh, rubbed into skin and then scraped away. From the furnace rooms, the acrid scent of wood smoke and coal dust seeped into the halls, a gritty counterpoint to the perfumes. As the day wore on, the scent of food from the thermopolia vendors drifted in, garlic sausage, baking bread, and cheap wine. And underneath it all, in the damp corners where the cleaning rags were stored or behind a loose tile, was the faint, persistent smell of mildew, the damp ghost that no amount of scrubbing could ever fully banish. This olfactory tapestry was the true signature of the place, a smell the attendant carried in his hair and tunic long after his shift ended. Visually, the spectacle was equally overwhelming, a dance of light and color and humanity. In the grand frigidarium, lamplight flickered off acres of polished marble, making the walls seem to breathe and the surface of the cold plunge pool shimmer like a dark mirror. A heat haze visibly rippled above the floor of the Caldarium, distorting the figures of bathers as they moved through the steam. Underfoot, the mosaics told silent stories, intricate patterns of dolphins, sea monsters and gods, their colors vibrant against the white marble, worn slightly smooth by the passage of countless wet feet. But the most compelling sight was the crowd itself. Here was Rome, naked and unguarded, the pale, soft skin of a senator, marked only by the thin line of a forgotten amulet, contrasted with the tanned, leathery hide of a sailor, his body a map of scars and sun damage. A young athlete's perfectly defined muscles gleamed with oil next to the round, comfortable belly of a retired merchant. Women, in their separate hours, moved in graceful, chattering groups, their hair piled high and adorned with simple pins, their laughter echoing differently in the vaulted space. The attendant saw it all, a living mosaic of humanity in every shape, age and station, all united in the simple, steamy pursuit of warmth and cleanliness. It was beautiful, chaotic, and utterly exhausting, a sensory world he controlled but could never escape. Beneath the perfumed steam and civilized chatter, the baths held a darker, parallel current. The very anonymity that made them a social equalizer also made them a perfect hunting ground. The most common crime was theft, and the apoditerium, the changing room, was its epicenter. Despite token systems and watchful attendants, a clever thief could strike with devastating speed. A patron, relaxed and vulnerable after his bath, would return to his niche to find his fine woolen tunic, his leather purse with a month's wages, or his father's signet ring simply gone. The resulting fury was immediate and terrifying, and it always fell first on the balneator. He was the man in charge, the obvious target for blame. A wealthy victim might demand immediate restitution, threatening a lawsuit or a beating from the attendant's owner if the goods were not recovered. In that moment, the attendant's world narrowed to a frantic search, questioning his staff, scanning the faces in the crowd for a known pickpocket, all while knowing the thief was likely already vanishing into the bustling street outside. The threat extended far beyond stolen property. In the dim, steamy corners of the less frequented rooms, or in the labyrinth of service corridors behind the furnaces, more sinister activities festered. Assaults could occur, a sudden, violent robbery in a shadowy alcove where cries were muffled by the general din. The baths were also notorious for prostitution, both female and male. While some establishments openly tolerated it, in others it operated in the shadows, with attendants sometimes acting as discreet go-betweens for a cut of the earnings. For a bribe, a balneator might look the other way, allowing a clandestine meeting to proceed in a supposedly empty storage room. This made the baths a hub for all manner of clandestine meetings, from illicit romantic affairs to political conspiracies, their conversations hidden in the hiss of steam and the splash of water. The attendant who knew too much about these secret dealings walked a dangerous line, holding power that could just as easily get him silenced. His own safety was never guaranteed. A gang of drunk youths, emboldened by wine and the crowd, might turn on him if he tried to eject them for rowdy behavior. A professional thief, caught in the act, could become violent. And then there was the most difficult challenge of all, the entitled, powerful patron who was the troublemaker. A senator's son, drunk and destructive, breaking tiles or harassing other bathers, presented an impossible dilemma. Confront him directly, and you risked a beating from his bodyguards or his father's devastating influence. ignore him, and you lost control of your own domain, inviting chaos from others who saw the rules being broken. The attendant's tools for maintaining order were limited. For common nuisances, he could eject someone himself, with the help of his strongest stokers. For serious threats, he could send a runner for the vigiles, the city's night watchmen who also patrolled by day. But by the time they arrived, the damage was often done. Mostly he relied on his wits, on de-escalation, on offering the angry drunk a free cup of wine to calm him, or on quietly appealing to the dignity of a powerful instigator to avoid a scene. It was a daily exercise in risk assessment, where a single misjudgment could end his career or his life. The steam that hid so many secrets could also hide a knife, and the cheerful noise of the crowd could drown out a single, desperate cry for help. Amidst the roaring chaos, a thoughtful attendant might have found his own quiet philosophy. The very steam that clouded the air could also clear the mind, and for many Romans, the principles of Stoicism offered a framework for enduring such a life with purpose. This philosophy, embraced by emperors and slaves alike, taught that virtue was found not in changing the world, but in mastering one's own reactions to it. For the balneator, this was a daily practice. He could not control the entitled senator who shouted over a lukewarm pool, nor could he change the fact of his own birth into slavery. These were external things, to be accepted with calm indifference. What he could control with fierce and focused dignity was the fire in the furnace. He could ensure the heat in the tepidarium was perfectly even. He could direct his staff with fairness, and he could scrub the marble until it gleamed, taking pride in a job done well despite the surrounding noise. This was his sphere of influence, small and soot-stained, but entirely his own. His tranquility was a victory won each hour, a conscious choice to meet relentless demand not with resentment, but with a steady, competent hand. It was a philosophy forged in heat and exhaustion, a way to find meaning in the endless, cyclical labor. In direct contrast, the baths themselves were a temple to a rival school of thought, Epicureanism. Where Stoicism sought virtue through discipline, Epicureanism pursued a simple, moderate pleasure as the highest good. And what place better embodied that pursuit? The sensation of slipping into the perfectly heated Caldarium after a long day, the camaraderie of friends in the warm tepidarium, the refreshing shock of the cold plunge, even the simple pleasure of a scraped back and a clean towel. These were all Epicurean delights. The attendant facilitated this pursuit of pleasure for others. Even as his own life demanded the Stoics' endurance, he saw firsthand how both philosophies lived side by side in the same steamy air, the patron seeking a moment of serene enjoyment, while the keeper of that serenity relied on inner fortitude to provide it. This duality reveals a deeper truth about Roman life. Grand philosophies were not just for scrolls in a library. They were lived in the grit and steam of everyday existence. A man could contemplate the nature of fate while stoking a furnace, or reflect on the simple good of a warm bath while skimming oil from a pool. The bathhouse, in all its noisy, messy humanity, was where abstract thought met physical reality. It reminds us that the search for meaning, whether through enduring hardship or savoring a moment's peace, is a universal human drama, one that played out as vividly on the wet marble of a Roman bath as it does anywhere in our world today. The steam parted for a different, quieter rhythm when the women arrived. In the grand imperial complexes, this often meant a separate wing, a mirror image of the men's facilities, but on a slightly smaller scale. In more modest neighborhood baths, it meant strict, legally enforced hours. Women would bathe in the morning, the halls still echoing from the night's cleaning, the air perhaps a little cooler before the furnaces reached their full roar. The role of the female attendant, the balneatrix, was just as vital and demanding as her male counterpart. She managed the same cycle of heat, water, and cleanliness, but within a world governed by different social rules. She collected fees, supervised the female slaves who cleaned and stoked the fires, and provided the same services, massages and strigal scrapings, for her patrons. Her domain required a particular kind of vigilance, not just for thieves, but for preserving the decorum and privacy that society demanded of respectable women. The atmosphere in these spaces could be surprisingly lively, a center of female social life away from the confines of the home. Here, matrons, merchants' wives, and ordinary women gathered, freed from the watchful eyes of their husbands or fathers. The rooms would have hummed with conversation, the latest gossip from the market, discussions of family matters, or the planning of a wedding. It was a rare opportunity for female camaraderie in a public setting. Yet, the tone was often noted as more subdued than the boisterous male halls. There were fewer shouts, less rowdy splashing, and the philosophical debates were replaced by different kinds of talk. The balneatrix moved through this environment as a trusted figure, a keeper of confidences who ensured the space remained a refuge. This separation stemmed from deep-seated Roman anxieties about morality and order. The idea of men and women bathing together, naked and relaxed, scandalized the conservative elite. Writers like the historian Livy lamented it as a corrupting influence, a sign of moral decay imported from Greece. For centuries, regulations tried to stamp it out. An early law, the Lex Scantinia, was even said to penalize immoral acts in the baths. Municipal decrees repeatedly enforced separation, with hefty fines for bathkeepers who allowed mixed bathing. But laws often reveal what people are actually doing. Despite the official disapproval, evidence suggests that mixed bathing did occur, especially in the later empire and in smaller, private establishments. It was likely a persistent feature of Roman life, a constant tug of war between austere tradition and human desire for shared social space. This tension adds a crucial layer to our understanding. The bathhouse was not one monolithic experience. It was at least two parallel worlds, one echoing with male bravado, the other humming with female conversation, each with its own attendant holding the line, each reflecting the complex and often contradictory values of the society that built them. The final patron left, and the heavy wooden doors groaned shut, sealing out the city's noise and locking in a sudden, profound silence. For the bath attendant, the end of his shift did not mean a return to a normal home. His home was the bathhouse itself. In smaller establishments, he likely slept in a cramped, cell-like room just off the furnace chamber, the residual heat from the hypocaust providing a constant, dry warmth through the night. In larger complexes, he might share a small apartment above the shops that lined the outer walls with his family, if he had one. The space was simple, functional, and always carried the faint, persistent sense of his trade: smoke, wet stone, and clean linen. His diet mirrored his station, humble and sustaining. A typical meal was a simple porridge of pulse, boiled barley or wheat, perhaps with some lentils or chickpeas stirred in, and of course, bread, the staple of the Roman world. If he was lucky, he might have a bit of cheese, some olives, or on a very good day, a piece of salted fish. The sizzling sausages and warm wine from the thermopolia vendors were for the patrons, not the staff, though a generous tip or a friendly vendor might sometimes mean a scrap of meat or a cup of the cheaper wine at the end of the day. For a slave attendant, this was his entire world, his life bounded by the bathhouse walls, his needs provided at a basic level by his owner. A freedman manager might afford a slightly better diet and a room with a window, but his life was still tethered to the relentless schedule of the baths. If he had a family, his long, irregular hours created a peculiar domestic rhythm. He would leave for work in the deep dark of early morning, long before his children awoke. He would be in the roaring heart of the city's social life all day, yet utterly separate from it, a silent figure in the steam. He would return home late, long after dusk, his body aching, his ears still ringing, his mind full of the day's minor crises and overheard secrets. His family knew him as a man who came home tired and smelling of smoke and vinegar, a provider whose labor was essential, but whose presence at the dinner table was often missed. His social life, too, was shaped by this isolation. His closest companions were likely the other bath slaves, the stokers and cleaners who shared the same grueling routine and understood the unique pressures of the job. They might share a simple meal after closing, exchanging stories about difficult patrons or laughing over the day's absurdities, a small community bound by soot and steam. He had little time or energy for the vibrant street life of Rome, for the festivals or the games. His world was one of inverted cycles, of work when others played, of silence when the city slept, and of solitude within the most crowded place in town. This was the final, humanizing layer of his existence. The quiet reality after the last splash echoed in the empty frigidarium. He was not just a functionary of heat and water, but a man who dreamed of a better meal, who missed his children's laughter, and who found solace in the shared exhaustion of the few who truly knew what his life cost. The stones themselves remember their work. Walk through the ruins of any Roman town, from Britain to Syria, and you will find the silent, enduring evidence of the balneator's world. Step down into the Praefurnium, the furnace room, and you can still see the soot-blackened bricks where the fires roared, the arched openings where slaves shoveled wood into the inferno. Crouch in the hollow space beneath a crumbled floor, and you will find the forest of brick pillars, the pili of the hypocaust, standing in orderly rows like the ghosts of a subterranean temple. These short, stout columns held up the entire weight of the bathhouse floor, creating the cavity through which hot air whispered, "Touch one," and you can almost feel the residual warmth of a fire last stoked 17 centuries ago. Follow the path of the water, and you might find a section of lead pipe, its thick walls still bearing the marks of the craftsman's hammer, a physical testament to the hydraulic system he managed every day. These are not just architectural features. They are the fingerprints of his daily labor, the physical framework of his entire existence. Without his constant attention, the hypocaust would crack, the pipes would clog, and this marvel of engineering would fall silent and cold. But stones are anonymous. To hear a voice from that steam, we must look to the words they left behind. In the ash-preserved streets of Pompeii, graffiti scratched into a wall tells a universal story of frustration. It reads, "Two friends were here, and while they had a bad time because of a thief." We can immediately place the balneator in this scene, sighing as he deals with the angry patrons in his apoditerium, his reputation on the line over a stolen purse. This casual scrawl, meant for a friend, accidentally echoes his daily anxiety across the centuries. More poignant are the formal tombstones. These were expensive, deliberate statements of identity. One found in Rome simply states, "To the spirits of the departed," for Lucius Coltilius Stephanus, balneator. Another, erected with love, reads, "To my dearest husband, Crescens," a bath attendant of the baths of Nero. These are not the grand monuments of senators boasting of conquests. They are the quiet, proud affirmations of working men. To have the word balneator carved in stone for eternity meant this was not a shameful job. It was a skilled trade, a source of dignity, a life's work worthy of remembrance. Sometimes the inscriptions offer a glimpse of personality. A tombstone from Ostia, the port of Rome, commemorates a man named Tiberius Claudius Dionysius. It proudly notes he was a balneator and a conductor, a freedman who rose to lease and run the baths himself. His story is one of ambition and success, carved for all to see. Another, from the city of Salona, is for a man named Felix. His epitaph calls him Felix balneator, Felix the bathkeeper. Was he known for his cheerful disposition amidst the steam, or was the name a hopeful blessing for the afterlife? We cannot know for sure, but the stone gives a name to the face we have been imagining, transforming a generic worker into a person. These fragments, etched in stone or scratched on plaster, are our most direct connection. They bridge the gap between the silent archaeology of furnaces and pipes and the living, breathing human who stood before them, ensuring the fire was hot and the water flowed. They remind us that history is not just about emperors and armies, but about the man who kept the baths open, the woman who guarded the towels, and the collective sigh of relief from a city seeking warmth and cleanliness at the end of a long Roman day. The warm, communal heart of Rome began to cool. As the Western Empire fragmented, the intricate machinery of Roman life slowly ground to a halt. The aqueducts, those marvels of engineering that fed the baths with endless fresh water, were the first to fail. Without a strong central authority to maintain them, they cracked and clogged, their life-giving flow reduced to a trickle. The grand thermae, dependent on this constant supply, fell silent. The hypocaust systems, those masterpieces of underfloor heating, required not just fuel, but specialized knowledge to maintain and repair. As the generations of balneators passed, that hard-won expertise was simply forgotten. The brick pillars crumbled, the flues filled with debris, and the great marble halls grew cold and damp. A world built on the precise management of heat and water could not survive the collapse of the system that created it. This physical decay was matched by a profound shift in ideas. The rising power of Christianity brought a new moral lens to Roman customs. While many early Christians saw nothing wrong with cleanliness, influential church fathers began to associate the lavish, social, and often promiscuous culture of the public baths with pagan decadence and sin. The focus shifted from the care of the body to the salvation of the soul. Nakedness, once a simple fact of the bathhouse, was now seen as a temptation. The communal or mixed gathering aspect was viewed with deep suspicion. Why indulge the flesh in a steamy palace when one should prepare for the kingdom of heaven? This wasn't a universal ban on washing, but it fundamentally changed the cultural importance of bathing from a public rite and social ritual to a private, often infrequent, necessity. In the West, the sophisticated, public role of the bath attendant simply faded away. Without the vast complexes to manage, there was no need for a conductor or a balneator with his team of stokers and cleaners. Bathing retreated into the private sphere, becoming a much simpler, more rudimentary affair. For most people in the early Middle Ages, it meant a wooden tub by the hearth, filled with water heated one bucket at a time. The attendant was replaced by a family member, and the experience was functional, not social. The idea of paying a quadrans for entry into a grand, steamy paradise seemed like a distant dream from a lost world. Yet the human desire for warmth, cleanliness, and therapeutic relief never truly vanished. It simply found new forms. In the Islamic world, which preserved and advanced much Roman engineering knowledge, the tradition of the public bath, the hammam, flourished. And later in the medieval period, especially in places like Scandinavia, and eventually in the Ottoman Empire, steam baths and heated rooms re-emerged. These were often simpler, using direct steam from poured water over hot stones, but they served a similar communal and cleansing purpose. The attendant returned in a new guise, the keeper of the sauna or the bathhouse attendant in a Turkish bath, still managing heat and hospitality, but within a completely different cultural framework. This long journey, from the collapse of the Roman hypocaust to the rise of the modern spa, shows us that the story of bathing is never just about water. It is a story about technology, social order, and what a society believes about the body itself. The fate of the balneator was tied to the fate of an entire civilization. When that civilization's infrastructure and ideals changed, his specialized world evaporated into the cold air, waiting centuries to be rediscovered in a new form. That warm, welcoming ghost of the Roman bathhouse never truly left us. It simply traded its marble halls for different walls and its quadrants for a credit card. The spirit of the balneator lives on in the modern spa attendant, the hotel concierge, and the pool technician, proving that the human need for managed relaxation is a constant across the ages. Think about it. A Roman entering the tepidarium sought release from the grime and stress of city life. Today, someone books a massage or a day at a spa for precisely the same reason: to shed the tension of work and traffic. The core transaction is identical: a payment for an experience of cleanliness, warmth, and care. The professional who facilitates that experience, whether in a toga or a crisp uniform, holds the same essential role: the guardian of a temporary paradise. Look at the modern spa attendant. Her duties are a direct echo. She greets you, manages your schedule, and ensures the environment is perfect. The steam room is fragrant. The hot tub is at the ideal temperature, and the towels are fluffy and warm. She is the master of atmosphere, just as her ancient counterpart was. The Roman balneator judged the heat of the floor with his bare foot, a living thermostat. Today's technician monitors digital controls for saunas and heated pools, but the goal is the same: maintaining a precise, comforting climate. The masseuse performing a deep tissue treatment is the direct descendant of the Roman unctor with his skilled hands and scented oils, both addressing the physical aches of their clients' daily life. Even the social aspect finds its parallel. Where ancient Romans gossiped on marble benches, friends today catch up in a relaxation lounge over herbal tea, the attendant ensuring a quiet, serene backdrop for connection. The evolution, however, is profound and tells its own story. In ancient Rome, the bath was a public rite, a social necessity funded by the state or wealthy patrons for the masses. Today's spa is overwhelmingly a private luxury, a premium experience you purchase for yourself. The Roman bath was about communal citizenship. Today's spa is about personal indulgence. This shift reflects a change in how we view self-care. From a civic duty to maintain public hygiene to a personal reward for individual effort, the hotel concierge is another clear heir. He holds the same social radar the balneator needed, reading guests, anticipating needs, and discreetly solving problems to ensure a seamless, pleasant stay. He brokers services, from restaurant reservations to theater tickets, much like the ancient attendant who might connect a merchant with a ship captain. His authority is rooted in knowledge and discretion, a currency that never goes out of style. And we cannot forget the unseen modern balneator, the pool and facility maintenance technician. His world is one of chlorine levels, pump filters, and water chemistry. A high-tech translation of the ancient struggle against algae and murk. Where the Roman stoker fed logs into a furnace, today's technician adjusts a gas heater or a solar thermal system. The threat of a cold, cloudy pool is just as real, and the blame falls just as squarely on the shoulders of the person in charge of the machinery. This continuity reveals something fundamental about civilization. We have always created specialized spaces for restoration. and we have always relied on a class of professionals to maintain the delicate illusion of effortless comfort within them. The tools have evolved from strigils to skincare products, from hypocausts to smart thermostats, but the human desire at the center and the skilled labor required to fulfill it remains beautifully, stubbornly the same. The next time you step into a steamy room or slip into a perfectly heated pool, remember you are participating in a ritual 2,000 years old, and someone somewhere is still diligently watching the temperature gauge, keeping the paradise running just for you. Was it a good life? That depends entirely on how you measure it. There was no glory, no statues erected in their honor, and the work was a bone-deep exhaustion that never truly faded. They breathed smoke, absorbed the anger of entitled patrons, and carried the constant dread of a theft or a fire that could end their livelihood in an instant. For a slave, it was a life of servitude in a gilded, steamy cage. Yet within those humid walls, a different kind of value thrived. It was a life at the absolute center of things, a ringside seat to the unfiltered drama of an empire. They were not passive observers. They were the essential conductors of that drama, the ones who made the communal magic possible. To reduce them to mere cleaners is to miss the point entirely. They were the engineers who kept a hidden world of fire and water in perfect, dangerous balance. They were the therapists whose skilled hands eased the aches of 1,000 bodies. They were the security guards who held the line against chaos, and the gossip hubs through which the city's secrets silently flowed. Theirs was a masterclass in practical intelligence, social navigation, and sheer endurance. So, while they may not have written the laws or led the legions, they operated the machinery of Roman well-being. Their world, in all its noisy, fragrant, demanding detail, is perhaps the most honest lens we have. It shows us Rome not as a parade of marble emperors, but as a living, breathing, sweating organism. It was vibrant, profoundly messy, and beautifully, relatably human. Every splash in the cold plunge, every whispered deal in the steam, every scrape of a strigil was a note in the symphony of daily life, and the balneator was the one who kept the music playing. Thank you for stepping into those worn sandals and seeing an empire through the steam. If this journey into the unseen corners of history resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and let us know in the comments which other forgotten Roman profession should we explore next. The baker who fed the legions, the scribe who copied history by lamplight, the choice is yours.